The local plan inspector's report indicated that Woodstock could accommodate around 600 new homes. If passed, there will be 730 new homes built by Blenheim alone across 3 enormous developments. Already, Blenheim have 300 homes under construction at Park View near the Bladen roundabout. There are 2 more applications for vast developments in Woodstock, for 250 homes at Banbury Road and for 180 at our site of Hill Rise.
These are the latest proposals in a tedious onslaught to spoil the historic town of Woodstock and its surround.
It will bring almost 1,800 new residents. That's a 41% increase on the population. The application for the Banbury Road site is for 250 rather than the 180 homes allocated in the consultation. If this is agreed, we would already be near the figure of 600 outlined by the local plan inspector. Woodstock does not have the infrastructure to cope with the extra influx of residents. The surgery is already bursting at the seams. Right now, the ratio of patients to GPs already exceeds government guidelines by 467 patients. With the new bills, there will be an unmanageable 2,714 patients for each GP at the surgery if there is no expansion of it. And the site is not suitable for expansion, as stated by Oxford NHS Clinical Commissioning Group in its objection. Finding somewhere to park in the historic town centre is already a major challenge. People simply drive on to shop elsewhere. Likewise, the schools do not have capacity for all the additional children. Woodstock Primary School is already full. The planning application for Hill Rise indicates that most of these children could go to Wootton Primary School, yet that school does not have capacity to accommodate all of them. And for those that do get places at Wootton, how are they going to get to school?
We live in Old Woodstock, and we've got twin boys, and they went to Wootton Primary School. You can't walk on the road because there are no pavements. It's a very busy road, and the other way you could potentially walk would be across the fields, but that's agricultural land, which is often very muddy, sometimes ploughed. You go through one field and then you get to a very busy little road, Stratford Lane, which is basically a rat run. When you're trying to get somewhere and then having to do that 4 times a day, no, not with little children, absolutely not. The children didn't have any friends in Woodstock until they went to secondary school, and when they were in, the difficulty with them was they were kind of outsiders in Wootton because they didn't live in Wootton, and outsiders in Woodstock because they didn't go to school in Woodstock. So it was always quite a tricky situation. So because the children went to school in Wootton, all of their social lives has happened in Wootton and the villages, and because of that, so has most of ours.
proposed access to the site off the busy A44 is dangerous. The inspector of the local plan did not identify traffic problems on the A44. He also assumed that residents would happily walk into town.
I lived in a cottage on Manor Road, which is actually the A44, and we lived there for 13 years, and it was a lovely cottage and we were very happy there. But when I was pregnant with our second child, I really began to worry about the road in particular, and I was worrying about pushing a pram with a newborn in it and my toddler on a buggy board, and sort of navigating those narrow paths down the hill. And I just had images of my daughter throwing herself off the buggy board and me having to make a decision about grabbing her, letting go of the pram, going downhill. And it sort of really concerned me, and actually that was a factor in us moving away from Old Woodstock.
So there are two main pinch points on Manor Road with regards to taking children safely down the road. The first is in the narrow bit outside number 75, 77. I've seen two HGV trucks bash into each other with their wing mirrors, and the glass and everything went everywhere.
And there's been a few times where the lorries sometimes mount the curb, and that I have been there when they have mounted the curb, and luckily I was on my own and not with a double buggy. But if you were with a double buggy, my experience as well is that with the children, they just like to run on down the hill. They're not always, you can't always hold their hands because they're just kids and playing and running.
It's treacherous, really. It's so busy, the traffic it flows so quickly. So it is a bit hairy every time I take that journey down. If I come across anybody that's in a wheelchair or a buggy, one of us has to go into the road, and it's easier for a buggy to go into the road. So those poor babies are being put at risk because the pavement isn't wide enough for the pedestrians.
Well, when I first started cycling, the only access that one has to the countryside, if you want to cycle in the countryside, is along the A44. And when I first started cycling, I saw how dangerous it was. If you're coming up the hill, cars or vans or even HGVs will overtake you, and they'll soon find that the road narrows at two pinch points, which means that cars coming down the hill in the opposite direction will squeeze the car overtaking me. And the car overtaking me will then have a choice between either avoiding the car coming down the hill or avoiding me.
There is no easy way around this problem. The road and paths cannot be widened here. Suggestions to take a foot and cycle path across the fields and water meadows towards the schools and town centre won't work either. They are prone to serious flooding, as you might expect of water meadows. So is the adjacent land near Owen Mumford. This area was flooded from December to April this year. In 2019, an application for planning permission to build 2 homes adjacent to number 1 Hill Rise was refused on appeal, largely on grounds that it would have a negative impact on the setting of Blenheim Palace as a World Heritage Site. Now Blenheim want to build 180 houses in the same area. They are asking the District Council to pass an application for 180 houses on the very field right next to the refused site.
It is in the local plan, but careful reading of the inspector report shows great reluctance to develop in Woodstock. His concerns were damage to heritage assets, and he was right to be concerned. Another inspector in 2004 had said Woodstock could not cope with more than a small 64-dwelling development, as larger proposals were too much for the infrastructure. Nothing's changed. If anything, Woodstock has less facilities than in 2004. Woodstock is internationally known, and it's a jewel in West Oxfordshire's crown. Please listen to those who know and love the town and keep it that way.
Woodstock Town Council owns the water meadows. 3 times they have rejected requests by the applicant for access to the water meadows by means of a bridge across the Glyme. The applicant has therefore proposed a second route. There is no detailed description about this second route in the application, only this dotted line. The route would be along a remote path through fields newly planted with woodland. It would then pass through dense woodland before crossing the dangerous River Glyme, recognised as a flood risk area, and continue again through dense woodland. The route would then join a section of Green Lane, which is an Ordnance Survey designated bridleway and which has no footways for pedestrians. The number of houses proposed for Banbury Road has changed to 235 from 250. This means that there would be a total of 715 houses across the 3 sites, slightly reduced from the 730 stated earlier in the video. However, the applicant is also applying for permission to build 500 houses on a 4th site, south of Purdiswell Farm and adjacent to the Parkview site. This land lies within Cherwell District Council, but Woodstock would naturally be the utility town. The total number of houses proposed from all 3 applications and Parkview, which is already under construction, is 1,215. This would almost double the size of Woodstock and would result in 615 more houses than the local plan said Woodstock could cope with. It would result in well over 3,000 patients per GP and reaffirm Woodstock as having the worst patient-to-GP ratio in Oxfordshire. It would put extreme pressure on parking and schools.